So I'm just about to talk to Danny Goggle, who's the filmmaker behind Searching for the Animal, which is a feature documentary that's up for multiple nominations at our festival. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Welcome to London. So Dan, can you just give us a brief synopsis of what your documentary is about?
Definitely. So the documentary follows a very internationally renowned filmmaker called Victor Gaviria. Mm-hmm. He normally works with natural actors, and so his films have this very unique energy.
Natural actors?
Yes.
What do you mean by that? Sorry.
As in not professional actors, so just
there's
real
they're
people.
not trained? They're not trained actors?
Yes,
yeah,
like
okay.
untrained actors.
Okay, yeah, okay.
His films have premiered in Cannes, and so they have acquired. He has acquired certain recognition, and the documentary follows his creative process. So in a way, we're revealing his trade secrets. Yeah.
Right.
but it really centers in the stories and the lives of the people that he comes across in the process of making the film.
So sorry, I've seen this. It's actually a film about how he makes films and the people that are involved in making films.
But the thing is that we focused it on the people, not so much in the craft of filmmaking. We focused it on, because it's natural actors, the people who he cast are not portraying the scenes. They're portraying, they're recounting their own life's experiences. So the casting is really like an anthropological X-ray of what's happening in Colombia. Because they tell you, we did 1,700 interviews.
Sorry, 1,700?
Yes.
Actual interviews?
Yes.
You were involved in all of that?
Yes, for the casting process for the movie.
Christ.
But this is, it's women and men of all ages. Mm-hmm. And they came across the casting process or came into our casting room because they had some story that related to gender violence, which is the theme of the fiction.
Right, okay, yeah, of course.
So basically, the documentary brings together the 7-year investigation that the director did to write the screenplay with the woman whose story is the center of the fiction. And then we have the casting, which is a universalized version of her story, where we can see how this story that happened to her 60 years ago is happening today, and it's happening and has been happening for the past 60 years. It's not just unique to the past, because a lot of people feel that gender violence is something that is declining in Colombia because of the resources to report, but that's not actually true. It's happening to the same degree. Yeah, to the same degree as it was happening before. And with the behind the scenes, we used it to recreate or to show how it was their stories were recreated, so it allows you to have the different narrations. You have the experience of the filmmaker who's trying to put this very complicated story together, the experience of the woman who actually lived it, going through her life story being recreated, and sometimes she couldn't handle it. She walked off set because it was so painful for her to relive her life. And then you have the narrations of the people who are acting it out, who are acting out their own lives, but like they're acting out her life, but with their own life experience that is kind of the same.
So it's a two-pronged question, this. How did you, I mean, you might have known about this for a long time. How did you become involved in telling the story? And also, how did you persuade the director that actually what you wanted to do was tell the story behind the story? That's the right way to describe it.
Yes.
So in other words, follow him and then, does that make sense?
Well, actually, I was a producer of the fiction.
Oh, right, so you hooked up from right, okay, so I'm with you.
I only had to, I mean, I didn't have the intention of directing the documentary, but I had a very clear intent of where it needed to go. So we actually had to switch directors at some point in the process because they were more in love with the craft of filmmaking part.
Right, okay.
And I was more passionate about the social aspect of the documentary. So I eventually ended up directing it because I really wanted it to reflect that social secret that had been revealed through the casting process.
Because I guess what essentially you're doing here is, although the story may be told in a narrative way on screen as not a work of fiction based on reality, because it is, what essentially, unless I'm getting the wrong end stick here, essentially what you're doing is telling their real story. Yes. Is that a better way to describe it? So rather than you acting out let's say for argument's sake that you're the actress, the untrained actress on this, but you have experience that's actually happened to you, what essentially you're doing is getting the actual story rather than an acted version of something they're trying to tell.
Well, the fiction was based on a single person story.
Right, okay.
One woman,
right,
called Margarita, who lived a terrifying life in the 70s and 80s with this man who was called the Animal.
right,
And so he subjected her for 7 years.
right.
So the fiction is based just on her story, but the actors have lived such similar parallel.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
that
parallel
they're pretty
lives,
much acting out their own lives.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when it was decided that you were going to be the director as well, you know, you were going to actually direct the film. Did you plug straight into it and say, yeah, I want to actually direct this? Because I think you said originally that wasn't the intention, was it?
But the fiction was directed by Victor. The director in the fiction didn't change.
No, but I'm talking about
documentary.
In the documentary.
Yes,
right.
because the documentary was directed by somebody who wanted to stay in the filmmaking aspect.
Right. Okay.
Which is a traditional behind the scenes, and that's not. I mean, we made a traditional behind the scenes as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we had to change so that we could stay with the people, with the casting, with the investigation, with the human element about, and like to give them a space to reveal all the secret lives that they have been having, because so many people live like that in Colombia and nobody really talks about it.
And how long did it take from start to finish, from the research to the finished product?
Well, the first interview ever made for this took place like in 2010, 2009, and we finished the documentary in December. So it took 7 years.
As in 3 months,
Yes.
2 months ago. Oh my God.
It took 7 years to make.
And during that whole period, it was your baby, you were involved all along the way?
No, I got involved in 2013 as the producer of the picture.
Yeah.
Before I arrived, there was no documentary in the sense that the casting, 300 casting interviews had been made before I arrived in 2010. And the other 1,300, we did them as, I participated as the producer of the movie. But the first time I saw the casting, I was very stricken because it gives you like heart palpitations. It's very, like the first time you see them, they move you.
And you listen to the stories, of course.
Yes,
yeah.
and it's
Did it affect
sleep
you?
depriving.
Was it affecting? Did it affect you?
Yes, you get nightmares, especially in such a high volume, because we were watching 30, 40, 50 interviews. I mean, we used 1% of the casting in the documentary.
Right, okay.
So you would get nightmares after watching day after day all this material. Yeah, it was intense, and so that's when the idea of a documentary was born.
To form, yeah.
It was really in 2014, even though the material is dated. It started a little bit farther back, and then for those 3 years, I have been like behind the process the whole time. Right now, a year ago, we received the support of the Colombian national TV channel. It's called Señal Colombia, and they supported us for the post-production process. So when the fiction goes out in theaters, the documentary will be screened in TV.
Right.
Because the fiction is very strong, and so most of the, it's very possible that in Colombia there can be a reaction to the fiction that we're being exaggerated, that Colombia is no longer that way. So the documentary has a very important role in grounding the movie to today's reality and explaining how this is happening even worse. Like the same and worse, because like nowadays you have different kinds of problems. Like the narco trafficker who controls one neighborhood sells the virgins to the narco trafficker who controls the next door neighborhood, and so there's all kinds of horrible human, like gender-related violence in Medellin and in the rest of Colombia. But it's because our whole social structure is a little bit distorted because of the ongoing war and trafficking and.
When you say what, the war on drugs, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like the war on drugs, and like since the 60s it's been so violent. I mean, it was violent before, but it's been particularly violent since the 60s. We've had guerrillas for 60 years now. And other military groups came to exist to fight against the guerrilla called the paramilitaries. So between like the official armed military groups, the guerrillas and the paramilitaries, the whole social construction of Colombia is kind of
shaky.
Yeah, it's like touched by evil. It's very hard to like find a person in Colombia who hasn't been directly affected by violence or by drugs or by the war in general, because either somebody has been robbed or they use drugs or they sell drugs. I mean, everybody around you has always been affected by that world.
And how did you, I mean, you've got to have, we would say, a pretty strong constitution to sit through all of this and absorb it and try not to be affected, which obviously you must be affected by it. But how do you try and remain aloof? Is that, aloof's probably the wrong word. Try and detach might be a better word, because you're trying to tell a real story, and yet it's such, the subject matter is so intense, as you've already alluded to. I mean, how do you deal with that?
Well, obviously we had to be quite ironical and quite cynical and have a light sense of self in the editing room and like be able to bounce off ideas and see if what is working. But I think in the heart of it is the humanity. It's understanding that the men are also victims. I mean, not seeing. I myself went through a relationship that had like problems, and I was very alone. And
is this during the making of the film?
No, that was when I was like 15.
Right, okay, sorry.
And so when that's how I could empathize and understand both well, especially her, but like I also don't feel judgmental towards the animals, because they are victims of society. They have been abandoned by society, have been victims of absurd cruelty, and Colombia is the country with the highest displaced population in the world. It surpasses African countries. So the amount of violence that the men that are violent have been victim of is huge. So like if you look at them with humanity and you understand that they are also, that they're not just being evil out of just a sense of destroying someone else, but it's a pain that they're carrying, that they have already been broken. And so that allows you to like see them in a way that is not judgmental and kind of like be able, although I mean obviously when you watch them and you see them say certain things, there's no words for it. But you understand that at another level, at a rational level, you understand why it happens, and that understanding and the desire to let them have a voice. I mean, and the need to like give the women a voice, and also because like it's a denouncing. We're denouncing that the men are abused to such point that they go on to abuse other people in this way. So I think what kept us going was this idea that we would have a chance to have this conversation and explain what is happening in Colombia and to bring it to light, because nobody wants to speak about it.
And what's next?
Well, the movie will be premiering in March. So
I mean, sort of post all of this, what I'm getting at is, after you finish this project per se, have you got something that's already waiting in the background that you're going to be working on? Perhaps you've started working on it now.
Well, I don't think I'm going to be working on actual films, but I'm still going to be working on the filmmaking industry. We're currently developing, in Colombia there's no syndicates, and so producers exploit labor, but I think that producers should understand that syndicates ensure the level of knowledge of the people you are hiring. So it's actually beneficial for producers to have a structured industry. So we're working on a platform to kind of help promote communication between filmmakers and about Colombian cinema, to see if we can move forward with like professionalizing and structuring the industry.
Because you could, I'm guessing, I know you said you lived in the US, was it for 4 years? Were you there?
Yes.
For 4 years. Have you considered going to the US to carry on doing your work, or you are rooted to Colombia?
Well, I found that the stories and the struggles of Americans, even though their struggles of all kinds, I didn't empathize with their difficulty as much as I empathize with the struggles of my own country. So I think it would be hard for me to make films that move my heart in the United States.
Right.
So I think I love the film industry, I love storytelling, I think they're great. I would love to make like an American film with those like set budgets, because then you have time to dedicate to
like
the
a narrative,
cinematography.
You're talking about like a work of fiction, yeah?
Yeah, because then you can take time for the cinematography and the visual language and all this stuff that sometimes you don't get a chance to do. But I think social stories and social change is a really important thing to me, so we'll see how things develop.
Okay. Listen, thank you. I knew it'd be a wonderful interview, so you've really done well.
Next we have the Scientific and Educational Award. Let's have a look at the nominations, please.
Muchos cuadernos, libros, de todo. Entonces yo me iba buscando los cuadernos que más hojas limpias tuvieran y arrancando las sucias. Pero no
An astonishing thing. Put a magnifying glass on it and it should reveal a vast wonderland of information and insight. Potential predictions about your future health and well-being. But for some...
As a matter of fact, I was known as really a health freak in my fraternity. I didn't
Brett
drink.
Bocock, tip of the
I was
iceberg.
the only guy ever in the fraternity ever who didn't drink, basically, in society. And this is probably the biggest...
To accept and the sanctifying of
To
a
Zion, the
in
living legacy
Ethiopia.
of the Queen of Sheba, King Solomon. And the award for Best Scientific and Educational Award goes to Searching for the Animal. Danny Bubble and Cisco Gavin and
thank Carl and the festival for having the opportunity to bring this conversation onto the table. And of course, we are incredibly grateful to all the people who participated in the documentary and had the will to share their testimony with us, and to the crew for their undying artistic advice. Thank you.
And now we have an award for